Welcome to the Immigrant Education Collaborative Podcast. We hope you enjoy this interview. So welcome to another episode of the Immigrant Education Collaborative Podcast. Today I have a very special guest with me, Anthony. How you doing, sir?
I'm doing well, Derek, man. Thank you very much for having me on here today.
I appreciate it, man. I appreciate you opening up your space and allowing us to do this interview here. So I want you to talk to us about growing up, having parents from two different countries. You know, your mom is from Bermuda, your dad is from Jamaica, and you were born where?
I was born right here. I was born in New York, actually. I was going to say right here from DC, but
Yeah.
I'm born in New York City.
Okay. So talk to us about, like, you know, being born in New York City to two parents from two different countries and what life was like as you're getting ready to go into school and, you know, like your school experience coming up.
Yeah, no, absolutely fantastic. Being born in New York, one of the best experiences I've actually personally had. My parents being from Jamaica, from Bermuda, different backgrounds of what was expected in the U.S. My father came here from Jamaica when he was in his teens, about 14, roughly, for high school. And my mother came here after she had gone to Canada for university. She worked back in Bermuda for a few years, and it was her dream to work on the stock exchange. So she absolutely made it her mission. And at the time, she's about 23-ish. She came out here to the U.S. to work at one of the investment firms out here.
Nice.
And my parents met. My father was NYPD, and they met. Pretty funny story. My mom always loves telling it to me. They met at the transit. My father was a transit cop at that time. I did the midnight shift, the overnight, and he was seeing my mother in the morning, and I asked her out and all. But eventually, they met, and I was.
Voila.
Yeah, no, thank God, right?
Yeah. Well, that's really dope, man. So talk to us about, like, your early experience, like, going to school, right? So you start off, I'm assuming, you start off in daycare, but when you start school, it's probably like preschool. What was that like, having parents from two countries, and how were they sort of like fostering your education journey?
Yeah, it was always very much, education was very big in my household. I think that kind of really does stem from that Caribbean flavor. I think education is always seen as the gateway for success, especially in the land of opportunity. Everyone always looks at America as this is a great place. If you can make it, especially like New York, you can make it there, you can make it anywhere. And so my parents were on me about my educational pursuits. I very much always remembering having to actually really put myself in a position to where I had to excel. I did. It was never, I won't say never good enough, it was always do extra. So I won't say I beg, remember I do. Some of the memories I have would be like writing an essay, for example. And my mother was very adamant on not doing simple structured essays. I was in maybe third grade or something like that, fifth grade. She would teach me how to write full paragraphs. I to the point, I'll actually make this comment here. There was a brief time when I actually had went to Bermuda right after right before kindergarten, actually. I briefly went out there for about a year. And I remember I came back when I went to the school that I went to from kindergarten until 7th grade. I remember coming back and I was reading at a 4th or 5th grade level. And I remember the first day I went to the school, the kindergarten was set up in different sections. So the day I arrived was a reading section. So they said, Anthony, you're in group A, and you got to go to the reading section. And every book they had was just so simple. And I said, I can't read this. And she said, oh, what do you if you can't read it? I said, no, it's not that I can't read it. It's just that it's boring. I need more advanced books. And she didn't believe me until she went upstairs to the library and got me 5th and 6th grade books, and I was reading through them like no problem. So, and I would stem from this from my mother and my father being very ensuring that I always was taught. I was taught to be at a very early age. I was taught math at an early age, to the point where even in school I was always excelling, and it was just very surreal to kind of. Because it was just normal to me, but I guess from the outside in, it looked different. I was always doing something academic.
Okay, so it sounds like your experience, especially your early experience in school, was very positive, right? Like you were doing well. You were excelling in a sense. But do you feel like it had to be based on your own advocacy or your parents advocating versus just allowing the school system to run its course?
Yeah, it's and God bless the school system because I mean I went to a school that had you know 8 years in it, 9 years in it, and you're catering to students of every different caliber. And I mean I remember and everyone's different, everyone has different learning curves, and my curve is just different.
Yeah.
And so I would always excel when it came to different problems, and I hate to say it this way, but I probably at that time was probably one of the smartest. I was definitely the smartest in my year level, and the more time I spent in the school, the more I was probably considered probably the smartest in the school.
Yeah.
And it's and I hate saying it that way.
Yeah.
But my examinations, and I think we were doing Terra Nova at the time, was the exams that were blanketed across, and I think my exams were always the highest at the grade level,
Yeah.
and it did attract a lot of attention from different people who were noted, and this carried on even years and years later as I progressed through middle school and high school.
Right.
And so from that standpoint, I was always very. I had a teacher because I always felt I had to, because I knew the answer to the questions. I always felt I had to answer it. And I remember I had a teacher when I was probably in third grade, and I wish I remember her name now. She would purposely not call on me, too much of my frustration.
Yeah.
And I remember one day after class, she said, Anthony, she goes, I know you know the answer. She was like, you don't have to prove it to me, because I know you know.
Yeah.
Because I want to make sure that the other students know.
Yeah.
And I would say that was one of the most pivotal things ever that actually occurred to me in my early educational pursuits, because I didn't really think of other students not knowing,
Yeah.
and from her standpoint, she had to make sure that the other students were capable of knowing and learning, and if they had, because students will shy away from answering the question if someone else is going to answer it, or they'll let someone else answer it. And so from that point I actually stopped raising my hand. Will always let other kids demonstrate that they could do it and know how to do it, and then of course my teacher, if no one else would answer, then she would say, yeah, do you know the answer?
Yeah.
So it was always very interesting to see that.
Yeah. So let's drill down on that a little bit, because I think it's important. You're touching on some things, right? You're touching about sort of your academic prowess and how advanced you were, but a lot of that came from the work that your parents were doing with you outside of school.
Yeah.
Right, which ultimately accelerated you past where like the norm of where most of the kids were. So would you attribute it to a lot of the work that happened outside of school, like the example about your mom helping you with the essays, is why you were sort of ahead of the curve?
I don't know.
Yeah.
One of the reasons is because I hate to say it this way, but my parents worked a lot.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like they, they taught me a lot, but a lot of it was self-knowledge, self-discovery. I honestly think I had an innate born. I guess it always comes up with this kind of argument. Are you innately born with the talent, or do you develop it?
Yeah.
And I would say I was born with a talent to adapt very quickly, and my parents put certain measures there that allowed me to kind of really go gung ho at it. But I was just always very naturally gifted, and I remember, like for example, I would be sick from school, and my mom, if she would get, and this is probably what it helped a lot, but she would get like these books, workshop books from the store, rip out the answers, in the back, and I would never see the answer pages.
Right.
And even if I'm sick, she'll always say, here's history, here's language, here's reading, here's writing, here's math. It's like 7, 8 of them.
Right.
And you have, 8, 10 pages in each one.
Yeah.
Get them done before I get home.
Yeah.
And I remember as a kid, maybe 8 years old or something, this is like 8 in the morning, I would sit there, watch TV, I would play PlayStation, like video games, go on computer in the early years of the internet. And then I would look at the clock and it would be like 5:30 something, like, mom's coming home at 6. Let me knock all these, and I would knock all of them down within a matter of maybe 100 minutes, an hour, finish it. And I just don't know if it was just because I just had that talent to do so, or it was a combination of it, perhaps. I really don't have the answer for that, but it did reflect.
Yeah. So you're saying that a lot of it is probably innate, right? It's this innate gift that you have. So how much of that plays into curiosity, like your will to learn?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like you being curious about how things work and how things operate, and recognizing those patterns as to how you can quickly adapt in terms of gaining the knowledge to master this material.
A lot. I've always been very curious, inquisitive kid, I used to have question and answer books. So history is one of my forays. Matter of fact, one of my master's degrees is in history.
Mm-hmm.
I actually have two of them in history.
Mm-hmm.
And it's because I love understanding the why.
Mm-hmm.
And I was always, and I will attribute that to my parents, because they always said, don't ask why to me, ask why, and then look for the answer and find the answer.
Yeah.
And so I think that's what always used to occur. I would want to understand something, and then I need to take it apart to understand why it actually works. And of course, in some things, you can't put a light bulb together.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I think a lot of people have different talent, different
Right.
areas.
Right.
And so my area was, when I was younger, was math. I used to be able to do very, very complicated math in my mind, which is a whole other story I'll get to later on.
Yeah.
But more so reading, history, policy, internet, kind of those kind of more, I would say tactile, but like more of those functions of disciplines. I think those are always more interesting to me.
Gotcha.
I can't paint you a portrait or nothing, but I can tell you the history of something.
That's really cool, man. So would you say, for those formative years, right, your early years, kindergarten, elementary school, as you're coming through the system with two parents who are immigrants, in a sense, how would you describe that period in terms of your education experience? Are you just excelling? You're curious. Things are going well. Are your parents putting you in? What else are you doing? Are you doing extracurricular stuff? Are you in music? Are you in band? What else are you? What are you doing?
Yeah. So in the '90s, growing up, that's where I was born in '91. My school did not have a lot of those after-school activities. My parents, we were okay. We were, economically disadvantaged. I would say it that way. It's very, for quite a while, for most of my formative years, money was always an issue. I remember as a young kid jumping around from house to house up until about I was probably in kindergarten when we finally got a stable apartment. And stayed there until we moved again, same building but different apartment in '98. My parents actually bought that unit, which was, I think that was the peak of the success. We started actually seeing some of the hard work starting to pay off.
Right.
But during those formative years, there was no band, there was no. I mean, I had music class,
Right.
and I had an interest in piano. So my teacher, he was a great guy, Mr. Hirschon. I still remember him. He was teaching me piano during the music class as much as he could. But outside of that, no, it wasn't.
Were you taking the piano? Were you picking it up, or how were you, developing as a piano player?
I was gradually I was understanding it, because again, it's it's like it is something I just couldn't pick up. But one thing I will say is I was very I don't know if the word is oratory. I can hear it, and then once I hear it, I can understand. I can replicate and play it. Take me a little time to do it. I couldn't read sheet music. Matter of fact, even in high school when I was in the choir class, I still couldn't read sheet music. It was very, very foreign to me. It's something I can't do.
But you could play by ear.
I play by ear. And so that drums was also another thing when I was in middle school. I did drums. That was a little different because you can play by ear with drum because you are bass line. So that was something you had to read sheet music, and that's why I had so much difficulty playing drum. But if you understand the beat, you keep the tempo of the beat, and then you're able to do it. So it was something I enjoyed, but I just wasn't proficient. In piano, I didn't get any proficiency. I didn't have enough time to really strike down on that. I will say the one activity that I did do was taekwondo. My parents did put me in that for exercise and stuff like that. But I think that was a real fun time in my life with socializing. Otherwise, academics. They wanted to skip me a few grades, and if I'm remembering correctly from when I was younger, they wanted to skip me 2 grades. And my parents did fear bullying, so they chose not to. And I obviously said not to as well. I didn't want to leave my friends behind.
Right.
And I often sit back and wonder now that I made that good choice. But
So did you feel, having that opportunity, do you feel like you were, in a sense, going through the motions a lot of times, especially in elementary school, where the material that they're teaching, you're kind of, past that?
Yeah, a lot of the times it was very much, I would pick up on a subject very quickly, and then I just didn't.
Yeah.
I would just do it, and I didn't care. I'd be very honest with you. I've never studied.
Yeah.
I've never had the need or reason to actually want to study.
Yeah.
I don't know. I usually in a classroom. I usually pick up something. I hear it one time,
Mhm.
and then I understand the concept of it.
Gotcha.
And then I no longer really need to worry about those study groups and study sessions,
Yeah.
which was very frustrating.
Yeah.
Because they would say go to a study group, and
Yeah.
I'm sitting here and
I got it.
Yeah, I don't
Yeah.
study this. And I remember my teacher saying, if you don't study, you're not going to pass. But every exam they put in front of me, every paper they put a 100 or
Yeah.
upper 90s,
Yeah.
which was very interesting
Yeah.
to see it real time and not as a child. You don't think about it; it's just what it is. And now reflecting, looking back, it was like I was very pivotal.
Yeah. Okay. So as we walk through your middle school years, you're in middle school, and then you'll talk to us about that. What was that like going your transition from like elementary school to middle school in terms of is it the same sort of experience where the material is not as challenging for you academically?
It was the same. The problem is that your personal life interjects a lot.
Mm-hmm.
At that time, 9/11 happened.
Right.
I was in 5th grade when that happened.
Mm-hmm.
And then, fortunately, my parents ended up going through some problems and getting divorced shortly after that. And as a kid, you kind of you don't understand. You don't understand the nuances behind the scenes. You don't get it.
Right.
And I'm sorry. I'll say you don't get it. You have a feeling. You understand. As children, understand. They're very perceptive of things. But you may not understand all the ingredients within it. And so that was a real problem. Finances became a real problem again. A very, very, very serious problem. And so, of course, you kind of lash out and, stop caring about things.
Yeah.
I didn't really care anymore. I didn't really know what to care about or why I stopped caring. And I remember in the education side of things, my teacher was adamant that I needed to maintain good grades. Because again, my examination grades were probably the best in the school, within the school itself. I don't know, the district or what have you. And I remember, she sent me to a counselor. Counselor, Mr. Villarreal, Stephen Villarreal. Loved this man dearly because at that time I was very isolated. I'm an only child, so I grew up very isolated. I think this is one of the reasons why I excel so much because I didn't have anyone to really, spend a lot of time with besides myself. Right. So reading and stuff, that was always something I did. Yeah. And he really put things into context for me, and it really kind of brought me back on track. And and my parents, although they were going to do their own thing, I have to say that, in each in their own way, still supported me and wanted me to do good and not be bothered by what they're going through and all that. So, but that was a very trying. My mother actually changed her career because she was in the stock exchange. She was in the actually she was in the World Trade Center during that attack.
Wow.
And survived that. She lost many friends.
Yeah.
She came home covered from head to toe.
Yeah.
I actually thought she was dead.
Yeah.
She couldn't get her because at the stock exchange at that time you couldn't have your cell phone on the floor, and you have to leave it in a locker.
Yeah.
And so she had her phone in a locker, and of course the building and stuff came down, and she couldn't grab anything. And we didn't see her come till that night, till about 10 o'clock that night. I remember my dad coming from. He was NYPD.
Yeah.
He had actually knocked off because he did the graveyard shift. So he had knocked off just before the attack happened. He was on his way out. And it was very trying time.
Yeah, for sure, man. Sorry to hear that.
Yeah, it is.
So that's another like a rough patch that you have to figure out because everybody's going through it. Your mom's kind of going through what she's going through, and you're going through, what you're going through also. Your dad's going through it also. So let me ask you this: as you're in middle school, with these, everything is sort of trying. At what point in your life do you start thinking about what you want to do as an adult? Like how old were you when you started like daydreaming about, when I get older I want to do this or I want to do that? Like when do those thoughts start to enter?
I never had those thoughts.
Really?
I never knew what I wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
At that point, at 12 years old, 11 years old, after 9/11, the divorce, my priority was, where's the food?
Yeah.
Because there was times there was no food in the house a lot of times.
Right.
And I remember being on the $2 lunch and breakfast program. I couldn't afford $2 for breakfast and lunch.
Mm-hmm.
So it was days I wouldn't eat. And
Right.
so for me, it wasn't worried about education to the point I remember there was a school called it's still there, Ronald McNair High School. I think it's a charter school in Jersey, and they. I remember one of the representatives coming there. My teacher, Ms. Buffer, had called me into the they something had happened, and one of the representatives came from the school, and they said, your grades are so high, we want you to come. Have you ever heard of McNair? I had no idea. I said, I've never heard of McNair. And my teacher said, we always go there during the fire drill when we leave the school. I said, I thought that was a library.
Yeah.
I've never noticed it before.
Yeah.
And they said, no, it's one of the best schools in the state, ranked, I think, third or something like that. And usually you have to take an exam to get into the school. And they said, for you, we'll waive the exam. Your grades are so good, we want you to come. I think that's why my teacher was so adamant that I see the counselor to make sure my grades didn't fall. Yeah. And this was in, I think, 7th grade. Yeah. And to the point where I did the same comment you just made, what was my, where was my mind at in terms of career or future focus? I told the lady, honesty, I had no thought of high school because I was in 7th grade. I never thought of high school. I'm trying to get to 8th grade. Yeah. And
one step at a time.
One step at a time. And, it was so funny because, I kind of often think back, maybe that would have been a good opportunity. That's not the opportunity that I took. Yeah. And I kind of reflect a bit. I wonder what could have been. But don't dwell on it too much, but I do think about it.
Yeah. But it's good that you created that opportunity with your hard work and that you were actually recognized for it and that opportunity was presented to you.
It's always good when you have opportunities, that are there for your benefit. And I kind of, hindsight's always 20/20 because I'm now more reflective of an opportunity not open up the door and answer. At that moment, I wasn't thinking about it. I was just focused on my personal stuff. Adult me now looks back and say, I wonder what could have came out of that opportunity had I taken that opportunity. But then I also look what opportunities I have now for the other path I chose. I think that's one of the key, concepts of life is that you're never gonna have the right answer. Yeah. It's just the answer.
Yeah, I love that, man. And I heard something similar to that where it says like you don't necessarily find your passion, like you're constantly evolving into that. Yeah. Right? So it's not like, okay, I found my passion and I'm done. You know what I mean? It's like we're all constantly evolving, which is what it sounds like was happening with you. So going back to McNair would have been for you to go to high school.
Yes.
Right? Yeah. So but talk to us, you finish the 7th grade and then what happens?
So my mother changed her career. She left Wall Street after, she lost a mentor, she lost many friends. Right. Couldn't go back. Yeah. It was very difficult.
Understandably so.
Yeah, she was. A lot of people don't understand the financial system in New York. It can't shut down. And this is before they had the. Now they have the in New Jersey, on the west side of it. They have the mirror data centers and stuff that kind of mirror was going. They didn't have that at the time. Yeah. So, they needed a skeleton crew to go in to keep working. And she, unfortunately, 3 or 4 days after the event, had to go back to work. And you're around. I hate to say this, but dead bodies and all that stuff, chemicals and all. Yeah. And God bless her because, it was trying. And I will say that she changed her whole career to education. One of the mentors she had was very easy to do scholarship donations and wanted to see inner city youth and minorities excel, especially in fields in which there aren't that many. And she took this as, a change and a vision to want to carry on that kind of legacy and help others. And so my mother completely pivoted and changed. And so one of the reasons why we had economic problems is because she had to actually quit her job to do all this. And I remember going to night school with her a lot of times and walking because we couldn't afford the gas for the car, and I would walk back like 3 miles or home or whatever in the winter. Anyway, it's funny looking at it now, but she used to work at a middle school and was paid as a substitute teacher. And then she got the job offer during the summer to work in Bermuda. And she came to me and she presented me the options. She said, Tony, we can stay here. I'm still working, I'm making $10 an hour as a substitute teacher. Or we can go to Bermuda where I'm making a little bit more. Yeah. And when you're a kid who's not eating because your poverty's shrinking, you're saying, what, it might be a good opportunity to kind of. And at that time, I kind of didn't want to change. And I think this has led me to change, a lot within my life and wanted the opportunity to go Bermuda. So I said, if that's what you think is going to be the best choice, Mom, I'm for it. Yeah. And I remember that summer we left and went to Bermuda, and I started 8th grade at Delwood Middle School.
Yeah. Okay, so what was that transition like, coming out of the American system where you've been, since I guess preschool to seventh grade, and now you're in Bermuda for eighth grade. So what's that first year transitioning into that system like?
Luckily for me, I kind of was able to transition pretty smoothly.
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the big reasons is because being from New York,
Mm-hmm.
at that time, this was in 2004, 50 Cent had just came out.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of New York music was hip hop and all that was very in the mainstream.
Yeah.
And at that juncture, when I came, I was a fascination to all the students within
Right.
my year level, because you're like, oh, you're from New York, oh,
Yeah,
you're
50.
50, and it's like, it was a great way to kind of transition more smoothly. Academically, it was too easy.
Yeah.
The school I went to, it was a good school, but not it's one of the roughest schools at that time, the middle school level, and great teachers though. I have to admit, some of my favorite teachers, Mr. Fredericks and Mr. Fox and Mr. James, these are and the vice principal, Clay Smith, rest his soul, was very. I never had a lot of male teachers. Coming up through the U.S. system was mostly female teachers. Actually, the only male teacher I had was our workshop teacher, Mr. Halstead, and our music teacher, Mr. Hershon. Everyone else was a female teacher. So it was very interesting to see the male dynamic and people who could understand from the boys' perspective, the boys' side. Conno Smith was our gym teacher and all that. And so I had great memories and learning from them. But again, I went into a system where I was so advanced. So at that time, the Bermuda copied the U.S. system. So they did turnover in Bermuda as well. And I remember being in Delwood, so advanced. And I will say I was very good at math. And now I've come to this story. I used to be able to do a lot of calculus and things like that in my head without a calculator. Things that you need a calculator for. And I remember being so advanced, my math teacher couldn't teach me. And I remember her telling me, just put your head down, go sleep.
Yeah, wow.
And I blame myself. I should have probably continued, but I just didn't care.
Yeah.
I didn't know what I wanted to do in life, and math wasn't something that excited me, to be very honest with you. I knew I would never go into a profession with math.
Yeah.
So I took that as okay, go ahead, sign.
At that time.
I care. And I could, at the time, so I was working to put money on the table to help my mom. So I was 13, so for me, you work at 13, packing groceries, like that. So I was doing stuff like that to help my mom out a bit, because personal life, we were still going through some issues when we came there and stuff like that. But we were weathering it.
Yeah.
And that was a very disappointing thing for the But my other classes were very good. The computer classes. I will say, at one point, I thought about becoming an architect, civil engineer. That was But then when I found out that actually learned the drawings, I said, I can't draw to save my. I draw stick figures. I can't do it.
I'm out.
Yeah, this is not for me. But it was very interesting that shift over. I will admit though, I think this is another big problem when you transfer, you go into education systems, you try to fit in. And I don't know if it's just innate within the culture or what have you, but when you try hard, people will target you. And I saw that when I was even in the U.S. system, in the inner city school, you try hard, what are you trying for? And people target you. And it's the same thing, because Bermuda at that time was kind of Americanized in a sense. There's a flavor of Caribbean Americanization, UK influence. So it's a very dynamic country, and kind of a melting pot, almost like a little mini New York when you think about it. But also the same transition there was, trying hard is seen in a negative light. So I didn't try hard. I was good at it, but I remember graduating Delwood with like a 1.7 GPA or something. And to the point, my mother told me that we were going to be there for 1 year in Bermuda, and we were going to go back to the States. So that didn't really help. I kind of just shrugged it off, like, I don't really care. And to my detriment, because my Terra Nova grades were exceedingly high. I was at that point in 8th grade. I was post high school level on every exam, math, reading, writing. It was very insane. And
but the day to day was not.
It was, I guess because it was boring too, but no one even. But again, you do all this effort, you do the work, and at that point, nobody cares. That's the sad part about it. It was no fanfare made. It's more, about sports than academics.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that holds true to a lot. And I think maybe because sports, when you think about it, an athlete is a 1 in a million. You really think about it from that sense, I can see why.
Yeah.
But I've always, believed that, academic is very important because you do have doctors and lawyers and chemists and all the other different kind of,
Yeah.
that build a society.
Yeah.
Anyway, so yeah, that was my fortunate foray in the final closing chapter of my middle school.
Yeah. So what about the high school? Did you do all high school in Bermuda?
I did.
You did? Okay.
Yeah.
So did things take a turn?
It was funny because my mother went to high school. She went to Berkeley Institute,
Uh-huh.
and you had to take a test to get to Berkeley.
Mhm.
And I didn't know
Yeah.
because I thought we were leaving. And when my mother said no, but I changed my mind. I'm going to stay. And I scrambled to find the high school. There's only 2 public high schools in Bermuda. Everyone else is private.
Yeah.
So if you didn't get to Berkeley,
Yeah.
you went to Cedar Bridge.
Mhm.
And Cedar Bridge Academy is it's a pretty rough school.
Mhm.
Really, really rough.
Yeah.
The number of but again, school is what you make it.
Mhm.
I had some of the most fantastic teachers in Cedar Bridge. Matter of fact, teachers, some of the most influential teachers that I've had in my entire life
Mhm.
actually came out of Cedar Bridge. They were, always pushed me forward. And, and I have to say that even the students, it was kind of been a rough school. It's not like terrible rough when I say that. It was just, it's just kids being kids.
Right.
But, at that same time, I did want to fit in because at that point it was a mix of the different middle schools coming together.
Yeah.
So although I have friends from my previous middle school,
Right.
now you're making friends with kids from other middle schools and you're trying to, find your niche and kind of find your grouping and stuff. And I had some good friendships that transferred over and carried on from a middle school, and I made new friends in the other one. But I did get into altercations here and there with some people, and again, the same mindset was, well, I try hard.
Yeah.
And I credit Mr. Kieschnick, Weston Kieschnick. He's one of the top educators I've ever met.
Mhm.
He had in my first year, he had a Bermuda quiz team he started, and because every year they had a quiz team, so he cherry picked some students who had an interest in it. So it was like 8 students. I was one of them, and then we formed a new homeroom under his direction so that he can actually prepare us for the quiz that was coming up in a few months. And so after the quiz, they made it permanent. So these are my very, very good group of friends during my high school years. And he was very influential. He was my history teacher. And I think one of the reasons why I loved history before, but he made history more so fun. And I definitely respected that. My other good teacher, Mr. Khan, was absolutely taught English and was one of my absolute favorite teachers. Very much, he did debating.
Mhm.
And I had did debating in Delwood. I was in the debating circuit there, which was interesting. But I came in as a transfer student, so of course I was on the B team, even though I should have been on the A team,
Right,
and
right.
it is what it is. So I will say that the subsequent 2 years when I was in high school, I did debating there, and that went fantastic.
Mhm.
We went to the finals twice. I personally think we should have won, but
Yeah.
that's not me to say. I'm not the judges,
Yeah.
but we did
Great experience.
good valiant effort there.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing, right, the constant theme I'm hearing in your story as you talk about it are the adults who, play a pivotal role, right? Like you reference a lot of teachers that you've had who played a role in encouraging you and supporting you and just sort of enhancing that learning experience for you. So talk about how much, I know you touched on it, how much that really gave you motivation, because in a sense you know that these people have high expectations for you, right? Because they see something in you and they're letting it be known that they do see your genius and they're helping you to cultivate that. So how much of a boost does that give you in terms of your accountability to kind of reward them for their faith in you?
Well, yeah, absolutely, it's a good question, and I mean it's kind of what I see my mother now. My mother's a teacher, and it's reflective of that now. And as looking at my mother, how she teaches and how she does her best to impact students to be the success, because you never know what's going on in a student's life. What the home life looks like,
Right, right.
personal friendships, things
Absolutely.
like that, and you never know how much impact you can be on them. And I think for a teacher, helping even just one student kind of reach their potential, or at least give them an insight into who they are.
Yeah.
I think that's important. The milestones of
Yeah.
a teacher's success.
Yeah.
And so, the greatest reward that I was able to give, I would hope, is the fact that I continued to be me.
Yeah.
I continued to do my own thing.
Yeah.
It might not have been in the best way sometimes. Again, as an adolescent, you're still trying to fit in with your friends. You're trying to, stave off some things here and there. You're trying to, carve out your own identity.
Yeah.
And, it's like 16, 17, you don't have an identity.
Yeah.
You're formatting it.
Yeah.
I remember one of my Keisha, he had left, I think, after our second year, the third year, he left and going back to the States. He was an American teacher. Mr. Khan was from Guyana, actually. He stayed there the whole 4 years, so I was very close with him, and I would talk to him personally outside of just the academics of English.
Right.
I would just, he helped me really think big picture, and he was, one of the teachers who would say, what do you see yourself as? And the unfortunate part is that I didn't know. I was in many things. I was in, the debate, the quiz, the math competitions. I was in apprenticeship programs, some other things of that nature where you would typically expect a student to have a direction. And I think a lot of people had this direction of me. They would say, oh, he debates, he's going to be a lawyer. And that's what, that was a lot of it was leaning towards that. And I had a lot of people always ask me, oh, you're going to go into law? And my answer was like, I don't know. I don't know if I want to. I didn't have any clear direction on what I wanted in my career path. Even up to my final day of high school, I still didn't know.
Yeah, which is not a bad thing.
It's not a bad thing. The problem with it is the lack of clarity, and I envy those who do know what they want, because at least you have a clear direction of what you're trying to do next, and it prevents you from spinning your wheels.
Right,
and I think that became my issue, where I was kind of spinning my wheels, and that transitioned to why I have 2 high school diplomas, because I graduated from one and I had to go to another school because I didn't know what I wanted.
Right. What do you think was getting in the way of that?
One of the issues, I think, was just I didn't have my own identity mapped out. I always do things for other people, and I never do things for myself. My mother at that time, I was working, I was doing 2 jobs, I think, at the time, or something like that, and I was interning at a law firm, ironically enough. Great mentor of mine, James Wallington, great man, brilliant lawyer, brilliant mind as a person. I had the privilege of being around. And he was one of my first forays. I was interning in his law office in the summertime, like 3 summers. And because I thought perhaps law could be something I looked at. So that was like because everyone kept on mentioning it to me. And I just wasn't sure if it was going to be for me though. So I went there and
Great way to test it out, right?
I had to, but at the same time I had, another job at the supermarket, and I had another job at a wholesale place where you had to put money on the table to pay bills.
Right.
So, I didn't really know what I was going to get out of everything. And then once, it's called S4, that's the 12th grade. So it goes to S1, S2, S3, S4 in high school, senior years. So senior year, S4 came around. I realized that I had no idea what I wanted to do, but I said, I want to go to college. So at least because everyone says you can find yourself in college. And I wanted to go to Wales, University of Wales in England, because as a dual citizen, I'm allowed the privilege of going to the UK and getting tuition fees there. And I remember the advisor was supposed to help me. She got the dates wrong for the application deadline, and I missed the deadline. And at that time, I didn't know what I wanted to do. And my mother said, you know what, Tony, why don't you do another year, why don't you do high school prep year in a private high school and get better acclimated so you can find yourself. And that's what I did. So I graduated from Cedarburg Academy in 2009, and then I went to Soltis Grammar School in their SGY2 program. And I got a high school diploma from there as well, which was a very interesting dynamic because that was a private school compared to the public school I just left.
So you did that for 1 year?
That 1 year.
Okay. So during that 1 year time, what sort of revelation came out from that?
Private school is very different from public school. I see why people pay the money for it, to be very honest with you. But no, it wasn't too dissimilar, to be very honest. It was I think you did have a lot more expectations. I think there were more better resources. They were on top of you about where you're going for college. Like they were on us. Like, what are you doing? What's your career path? And etc. So I still didn't have a career in mind.
Yeah.
I did talk to my old teacher, Mr. Khan. I seen him at a bus stop one day. He just asked me how everything was going. And I was explaining what was happening. And he said, I was imagining you as president of the U.S. one day. And it really stuck with me because in our class we had wrote a speech. And I wrote a speech and loved the speech and all that. He said, you're a very good orator. You speak well. And he said, I can see you in politics. And it actually stuck with me for a minute. I said, that's interesting. And then I said, you know what? Maybe in college I'll study like political science or something. And that's what I opted to do. So I started in Saltus, I started looking more into, more political theory and things of that nature. I did better grades. I had good grades out of Cedar Ridge, but I had even better grades out of Saltus because they used the American grading system. And so it was a little bit of a better pivot. And from there, I applied to a bunch of colleges, and I got into mostly all of them. And that was how I finished up my K through 12 and plus one, I guess.
Yeah, plus one. Yeah. How did you make the decision on which college to go to?
I applied to Pace University. That was the first college I went to, was in New York.
Okay.
And I applied to so many, and although I didn't really have a clear, I probably should ask for more help. I'm a person who doesn't like to ask for help because I've been so on my own.
Yeah.
Probably should have asked for more help on it, but Pace was right there. It was in downtown New York, familiar with the area, and I lived in Jersey, so it was right across in Jersey City, which was right across the way by the PATH train. And I never really, I had some other schools I had looked at, but I didn't really have a clear distinction. But Pace was probably one of the better schools I got into.
Gotcha.
So, because I thought about going to, I think it was Tampa University, a few other ones, but I just knew New Jersey and New York so well. I set me up, and that's where I live.
Yeah.
And so I went to Pace, but I went there for 1 year. The poli sci was the classes I started to take, and then the tuition was insane, and I didn't have enough money. I saved up. My mother helped me out a bit, but she, I didn't want to put the burden on her.
Yeah.
So I ended up quitting school. I quit and I went to work. I worked for 3 years.
So you're working, and while you're doing this, after starting off as a poli-sci major, essentially, what are you thinking about as you're going through this patch right here?
You get cheaper school. But I got disillusioned with school at that time. I really did get disillusioned with it. I had kind of looked more internally, and I said, what has my high school, what has my middle school, what has my first year college, what has it accomplished for me?
Right.
I didn't really have anything to show for anything except, this debt, it's like $40,000, I think it was the first year.
Yeah.
It was just, I just didn't know what to make of it, and I just said, well, I'll work and save up some money and I'll figure it out. And I only meant to do it for a year, and it's funny how 3 years goes by very quickly. One of the things I love doing is writing, so I actually was writing music. So although I can't play music and I can't draw stuff, I'm a great writer. So I was doing writing, and I was like, it would be interesting and passion and stuff. And but of course, breaking into that industry is extraordinarily difficult. And I kind of made a promise to myself, like I didn't want to just sit there and spend my time. I wanted to juggle both and
Right.
just hedge my bets. And then I remember I was at a job, and my boss had said to me one day, you need me more than I need you. It's a very powerful statement.
Yeah.
All right, I'm still friends with the guy.
Yeah.
He's a very cool guy. He was cool, but it was just that statement. It was just some stuff that was going on at the company. It was a rental company, and it was just some stuff going on there at that time, which kind of, was annoying. And then, it was a friend of mine. We were working together there, and for him to say something that was very hurtful.
Yeah.
And I said I never want to be in a position where someone would ever say that to me again. And I told my mother, and she said, "Well, why don't you consider going back to college?" I looked at my bank account and said, "Well, I have a little bit of money saved up."
Yeah.
And I said I could probably need a cheaper school. Her friend, matter of fact, I went Taekwondo with the son, recommended New Jersey City University, which is in New Jersey. And it was I went online, looked it up. Tuition was pretty affordable, and I said, "Okay, I'll apply." And when I called in to apply, they said, well, the deadline is Friday. This was the Friday the next week. And they said, I said, okay, I'll apply as a new student. They said, no, you got to transfer because you already have a first year done.
Right.
I said, oh, come on. So I had to race to get the transcripts from Pace, and it was but things happen for reasons because that Friday deadline, I remember calling them that morning, and the lady said, no, we still don't have anything. And I said, oh, come on, can you please check again? She said, okay, let me. She goes, well, we did get new mail. Let me just see if it's here. And she went through and said, oh, is your name Anthony? I said, yeah. She goes, oh, I have it right here from Pace. I said, oh, thank God.
Yeah.
So I enrolled in that school. I met one of my fantastic favorite teachers, Karen DeSoto, which is a lawyer, brilliant as well. Really inspired me a lot to get into more into the political science side of things. I carried that over.
Yeah.
And then I had great other Mr. Moskowitz, a few other great teachers as well, that really kept that drive going.
Yeah.
And then, I will say that from NJCU, I've been in school at that point for about 11 years straight.
Yeah. Okay. So talk to us about, what career-wise, what you've done with all this education. What have you, and how did you sort of make the leap from school to, to career? Yeah.
It's a funny story because I actually just stumbled into my career. It's the funniest thing.
Right.
I never really had the direction of what I wanted to do. I remember my teacher was kind of said he's all into politics. That's why I was doing political science. And then I remember briefly thinking, well, I'd love to go into something that's international relations based. And I thought about law. That's when I was interning with the law firm with Mr. Wallington, his law firm as barristers and attorneys. And, life changed, life happened. And I remember going at NJCU, I was going to go I got an internship at the Department of Veteran Affairs out here in DC. It's my first time living in DC. And, I'm a more mature student. I'm in my mid-20s at this point. I started NJCU at 23. So at this point, I'm like 25 years old. And, great people there. You meet people who influence you and all that. And, I met, Raleigh and Gabe, these guys were, Clay, John, great people. And they really honed me down and said, well, what do you want to do as a career? And I said, they even offered me a job there at the department when I graduated college. And I said, you know what? I want to go to the Air Force. I have two uncles that were in the military. One was in the Marines. I grew up real close with him, Mark, and then my other older uncle, Marvin. He was in the Army. But I remember as a kid growing up more so with Mark and Marvin at that time had already transitioned going to the Army. Mark was about 16, so I was with him for a few years before he went to the Marines. And he had this poster of it, and he said, that's what I want to do. And when I was at the Department of Veteran Affairs, I remembered that, and I said, wow, it'd be really nice to do, military service and, that kind of give back to the country kind of thing. And I loved helping the veterans and stuff. So I said, you know what, I think I want to join the Air Force. My mother was very much against it. I'm an only child. She said, you're not going to the Air Force. She said, I'll make a bet with you. I said, all right. She says, apply for a master's program. If you get into it, you got to go. If you don't get into it, you go to the Air Force. So I said, okay, I get to pick the program. She said, yeah. So I picked Columbia University. They had a history program. It was a joint program with London School of Economics. And you had to get into both schools. I had nothing else to get into both schools. Matter of fact, I was in Thailand. I was doing a study abroad in Thailand when I did the final application submission. And I remember being with a friend of mine. She was sitting there, we was chatting. And I said, yeah, Air Force is a shoe-in. I'll never forget, I got the email from the school saying congratulations. And I sat there for like 10, 15 minutes like, She said, you don't seem that happy. I said, no, I just lost the bet. And she's like, are you going to tell your mom? I'm like, I don't know, I'm contemplating lying to her, telling her I didn't get in, but I knew that would break her heart. So I called my mom, and she was excited, and she said, oh, wonderful. So that was a history program. And then I thought about doing history as a teacher. And then I was applying to some stuff, and I kind of didn't really know what to do next. And then I said, well, you know what? Circle back to where people said maybe go back into law. And so I ended up going to apply for law school. I got into some law schools in England. And so I did my tertiary application. So I got into University of Leeds, London School of Economics. And then before I went there, I had interned at this office here. So what I currently do right now is the overseas representative for the government of Bermuda here in the United States, and I'm the director of the Washington, D.C. office. I essentially handle our presence here in the U.S. They had an internship here back in 2019, and I applied for it and I ended up getting it, and because I really needed the money. So it was this 12-week long program, paid very well, and so I took the job. It's the only time I saw it actually advertised ever. And so then because COVID happened after that, and I did it. Went to law school. Finished Leeds in 2 years, and then I was doing the LPC program in England. They have a legal practice course you have to take, unlike the U.S. where you do the bar exam. They actually have a course you have to take, and then you got to go qualify with the actual law firm. So I was doing some internships at some law firms, and I was doing what I had to do, and it just wasn't calling me. And I remember being on the phone with my mom one day, and I was very frustrated with myself because I thought I found my niche. I thought I found what I wanted to do, and I just didn't have great feeling in it. And my mom said, Tony, instead of beating yourself up, why don't you reach back out to your former boss with the government job you had and see if that's available. And I did. They advertised and got it. I've been here the last 4 years.
That's interesting, right? So it goes back to what you're saying. You had to get to a point where you could kind of put yourself first and think about doing things for yourself. Right? And then so you go into law because you've been hearing about how great of an orator you are and how the debate team, so everything looked like it was aligned for law. And then so you kind of just let me give it a go. Right? So you do that, and then you're like, it's not that meaningful to me. This doesn't feel like it.
It wasn't fulfilling. At the end of the day, it didn't fulfill me. Not to stop the fact that I have 3 law degrees. I don't know why I have 3, but I mean, I think I'm more fascinated with the knowledge. And I think that's been everything that I've been touching so far. And I think this job allows me to actually apply the knowledge in a multidisciplinary way. Law you can do, but you should specialize in law. But here, I deal with economics, I deal with policy, I deal with politicians, I deal with other driving forces, tourism, so many different avenues in which I have interest in. And I'm able to showcase my vast array of talents in a very focal point.
Which is something that you probably couldn't have predicted as a high school student. How would you have written this job description? You wouldn't have.
I mean, this job description wasn't even on my desk.
Exactly.
I was still worrying about video games and we were gonna get pizza.
So talk to us about where you are now. Like, when you reflect back on the journey, right? And it's a really powerful journey that you and your family have taken. All right. So thank you for sharing that with us, man. But as you reflect back and you think back to being a child, going through like all these different maturation processes, and where you are now, like how do you put that into words? How do you sum that up?
Luck. I have stumbled haphazardly into a lot of things, and I've just been very fortunate, lucky in a sense, unlucky in some ways, lucky in other ways. And I think a lot of people. I have the conversation with a good friend of mine. Her name's Tiffany. We talk about this kind of stuff, and she's always saying, you minimize your work, your determination, and your grit. And I said, I don't minimize it. I understand what I do. I mean, I'm being very honest with you. Sometimes, when I was going through school, I was lazy. I'm very honest about that. I never had to study. I don't know how to. Even in college, I've never opened a book. I've opened the books to see the pages. Never had to study from them. And, I work hard at what I do because I love what I do. Everything I do for this job, I enjoy it because I want to see the country succeed. But I got this job right timing. I wonder going into McNair, I might not have this job because have been in school in Bermuda. I got scholarships that helped me quite a bit. I have a large student loan would have been a lot larger without the scholarship money that helped. So I've had very good moments where it's been good fortune. Not to minimize my own efforts, but I always think if I didn't have that luck, things could be much worse. or things could be much better. I really don't know.
It's interesting. So let me ask you this. So you've heard the saying when people say you create your own luck, right? So you took action, and you've always taken consistent action. Like, you know, even though you say, you know, I didn't open up the books, I didn't do this, but you were always taking action in terms of learning, and also working closely with a lot of mentors who came into your life, right? Like, you were humble enough to seek counsel and advice from a lot of the adults, you know, a lot of the teachers, because you referenced a whole list of folks. Right? You got a list of, you know, like mentors, which is a huge, you know, bonus, right? To have all these mentors who can kind of guide you and give you feedback and support. But it also sounds like to me that all the action that you've taken has actually like prepared you for something. Like you said, if you went to McNair, you would not qualify, you know, because you would not have been in Bermuda. But it seems like, do you feel like you're at home? Like this is sort of like you at your best, like where you're getting an opportunity to kind of showcase all the different interests that you have. And are you personally satisfied going through this process?
Overall, the process, it's a good question. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe because I don't feel the process is complete.
Yeah.
I'm a very big believer that education doesn't stop,
right,
and you learn, and life doesn't stop.
Yeah, for sure.
So, you know, am I the best at this moment with this job right here?
And not as a stopping point, but just in terms of, you know, taking a moment to just reflect, right? Because you're still growing, you're still evolving. Like, This is not your final chapter, right?
No,
It's
not a final chapter. I mean, I am grateful for this opportunity that I have here, because this does allow me to secure, you know, and support Bermuda.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you know, my boss is a very great boss.
Yeah.
You know, my premier is an excellent premier,
Yeah.
and the people who back home, you know, I guess it's like any government job, or you know, you are a cog in the system.
Mm-hmm.
And although when you look externally, it's just one piece,
Yeah.
but it's an integral piece, because you're the one that keeps something going,
Yeah.
dynamic. And even if people don't understand what I do or know what I do, that's fine. You don't have to know or understand it. You know, understand that I do what I do because it needs to be done.
Yeah.
I'm good at what I do.
Yeah.
And so that's the takeaway I have from this. And I love this job. I mean, you know, I'm still here because I do love it. I enjoy every day is a new day,
Yeah.
a new challenge, and I absolutely, you know, revel in that.
Yeah.
I do, you know, have my own consultancy firms. I'm allowed to consult.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly, I don't do too much because I do focus a lot on this.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, when I have other challenges and other problems that pop up, it
Yeah.
engages me to want to keep bettering myself, and I learn from those opportunities and how I can better myself in this role, how to better myself as an actual person to people, how I can give back to others.
Yeah.
And I think that's been the foundation, is finding oneself,
Yeah.
and then really seeing how you can inspire others. You know, as I said, you know, you mentioned I said a cadre of names.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it's probably I probably left out so many, like, you know, Dr. Jim Jackson, and,
Mm-hmm.
you know, he's another good mentor of mine.
Yeah.
And no matter how small and brief those mentorships have been,
Yeah.
some of them just been 1 year, some of them, you know, multiple years. Some I don't speak to now, some have passed away. But I think it's people understand. I won't say understand, but people should understand that no matter how brief an interaction you have with somebody, you just never know how your actions may impact that person.
Yeah.
And so I take that to heart,
Yes.
because I don't know, you know, if my story is, maybe someone watching might be impacted by
Yeah.
this and say, hey, you know, that person went through some of the same things I'm going through, or I want to inspire to something like that, or even if they don't have anything, it's just something they just watch, and
Yeah.
you know, some type of positive takeaway from what we do.
And here's the thing, right? So I'm smiling as you're saying that, because you're summing up exactly what I'm about to say, right? I'm not going to be as eloquent as you are. But as you're talking, what is evident to me, what you're a reflection of, you are actually a reflection of what you do, which is public service, right? And you talked about, you know, what was poured into you, and the people who sort of like saw the genius in you, and they saw, you know, value and promise in you. And essentially that's what you reflect in the work that you do. You know what I mean? So I think you kind of embody public service and giving back, right? And so when I keep saying, hey, you keep mentioning all these mentors, it's like you're actually reciprocating. You're giving back what was poured into you. You're giving it right back, which I think is really that's a really dope evolution, right? And whether you're doing it doesn't seem like you're getting up every day like, hey, I got to give back, and maybe you are, right? But you're just doing that naturally because that's just who you are. But it's also kind of like how you've lived your life and the life that you've lived.
I think you said it more eloquently than I probably could have said it just now. But I think you hit on every point you said was 100% correct.
Yeah. Because that's what I'm hearing from the story, man. It's it is a story of understanding. It's compassion. It's tough times, right? But then there's still all these positive adults who are there, and in a lot of the work that you do, you're able to. So you embody that naturally because that's the life that you lived, but you also are giving back and serving. You know what I mean? So I'm hearing a lot of service. It's a reflection of what your dad did for his work, what your mom has done in the second chapter of her career, and then so you're just a beautiful reflection of not just what your parents have done, but also just what you've experienced. Just living life, especially in school. You know what I mean? Like you ran into a lot of very good mentors who poured into you, and that allowed you to not have to stay in one lane, but to have all this vast, array of interests that you can then, stay stimulated by, as opposed to feeling like, hey, I don't want to just get locked down in the law, or I don't want to just get locked down over here in, public policy, but I get to, do all these different things.
That's a very, very good point. It's very true. I mean, I wouldn't be who I am without the people who helped put me up.
Yeah. But Anthony, thank you, man. I really appreciate you taking the time out. Thanks again for inviting us on your turf, taking the time out to share your story. It's a beautiful story, right? And it also, like when you tell me about 9/11 and that your mom was there, like I'm like, wow, like that's just overcoming that and pushing past that is because that impacts the whole family, right? It impacts your mom in a way that who feels and knows it, right? We won't be, but it also impacts you because you're her child, and whatever she's going through, you're going through it also, right?
Yeah.
So it's a powerful story. You know what I mean? But before we go, I want you to is there anything that you have prepared to answer that I didn't ask you that you want to throw out there? And then who are some other people? You definitely gave a ton of shout outs, but if you think of anyone else who's been a pivotal person outside of your parents, because the thing that kept coming up to me is when you went back to Bermuda, right? Family, right? Did you go to school with cousins? Did you what was that like? What was your mom's family situation like? Did you have cousins who were your age, or was everybody else just older than you, or just way younger than you? What was that?
Sure. So when we went back, actually, we had to stay at my grandmother's house. And we left about a few months in. To got another place. My great grandparents had an apartment in their house that we stayed at, and they left there. I'm the old of my immediate cousins. I'm the oldest. I'm the oldest by 8 years.
Yeah.
So at that time, I have a little cousin. I'm proud of my cousins. I love them. They're all doing something fantastic. I know the one who's youngest, second youngest to me, Jade, who's trying to be an airplane pilot right now. He's doing flying. And my youngest one after that, Sadia, she's going into dentistry. She's in dentistry school. Fantastic. And the youngest one, Savio, he's fantastic. He's working hard right now. And, finding his own direction. He's very fantastic in that. So I love my cousins. Unfortunately, at that time growing up, either they were very infant or very newborn or very young. Jaden was about maybe 5 or so.
Right there.
With the family, because we were so away, I would come back sometimes to see my grandmother and all that. Because we had been away for so much and so long, it wasn't the same dynamic. Even in Bermuda, it was more so me and my mother were kind of on our own, just kind of doing our own thing. So I mean, it was downplayed my family, but it was just more so me and my mother found our own pathway.
Gotcha.
And I put a lot into her and a lot into myself, and so she and I have a very unique, very strong bond because we've had to weather a lot of stuff together. I'll share one quick story if I can, because I just remembered this. I think this is my whole motivation for why I do what I do for my mom, and I do a lot for her when I can, because she sacrifices and does so much for me.
Right.
And I can't describe the words, and it's nothing I can ever do to repay it. And just one example, I actually said this in a scholarship interview, and I had to go crying. I did get that scholarship out. But it's a true story, and it's what drives me. I remember a little bit after the divorce, and it hit my mom hard. It pulled my parents hard. No one wants to go do something like that. But I remember my mom taking me to school one day, so we didn't have any money. It was a snow day, I think the week before, it was flurries, and they closed the school down for some random reason. The next week, it snowed. It had to be like almost 3 feet of snow. It was ridiculous, and we had used up all the snow days though.
Yeah.
So I guess they didn't assume another snow day was going to happen, and couldn't really. My mother at the time had to go to the PATH train.
Yeah.
That's how she gets to work. But we were about 10, 11 blocks from it, and didn't have enough money couldn't afford to move the car to park, and didn't afford money for gas for the car to move it anyway. And so I remember my mom walking me out a few blocks from the school, so she walked me from home to the school on her way to the train station. And I'll never forget, my mom's always been a strong person, and I've never seen defeat on her face, except that day. When I saw her, she was tired. And she gave me a big hug, and she was like, Tony, I have to go. You be safe. I'll see you tonight when I get home. And you could just see I can't describe it. It's almost someone who wants to kind of give up, but you can't. And you have to trudge on. And, she's a petite woman, she's like 5 feet, like my height. I remember the snow being past her knees, basically, or almost up to her knees. And the whole sidewalk, all the way down, was all full of snow, was shoveled. And I got to the school on the corner, so my school opened up at like 8 o'clock in the morning or something like that, but she allowed me to make work ahead of time. So I unfortunately had the unfortunate problem actually having to stand in the snow. While it was still snowing, all the snow's on the floor. My school door wasn't open, so I had to stand outside. I had to wait outside for like 40 minutes until they opened the door, so I'm not happy. But what do you do when you're 11 years old? What can you do? So, or I was 10 or 11. Maybe 11. Or I might be going 11 actually. Long story short, I stood on the corner and I watched my mom slowly but steadily have to trudge over the snow, one step at a time, and trudge. I think I watched her for about a good maybe about 20 minutes until I couldn't see her anymore.
Yeah.
And it was nobody else outside, no cars, no people, nothing. I was literally by myself.
Yeah.
And I can only imagine what she was thinking.
Yeah.
And the spirit that it took to actually have, to find the determination and the will to make that walk.
Yeah.
And it's something that's always stuck with me because, it's vivid in my mind, it's always burned in my mind. And, just the look on her face that she didn't give up. And it goes to me, why, if she can go through that, why should I give up?
Yeah.
And then it goes to a lot of people.
Yeah.
A lot of people have very similar stories like that, where it's all this adversity, it's this pain and suffering, but you go on.
Yeah.
And that emboldens me to do what I have to do.
Yeah.
And that's what I use when I feel like I can't. I often think back to that.
Yeah.
She did.
Yeah.
So I can't too.
Yeah, man. And what a great example for her to set, how to be resilient despite feeling down and out.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So that's a hell of a, so shout out to your mom, man. I appreciate you giving her flowers for that and sharing that story with us to let us know how much of an impact that had on you and your life.
I appreciate letting me share that.
Yeah,
It's
sure.
a very personal story.
Yeah.
And, one I don't often tell a lot, but
Yeah.
it's the one. It's of all the things in my life, of everything that I've ever been through. That is one. That's probably one of the most powerful ones I have.
Yeah. Yeah.
That keeps me grounded and motivated.
Yeah.
I mean, and of course, with my father, it's all he has, things with him too. But that is the one.
Yeah, man.
It's just,
Because you remember that look is never going to go away. You remember that look on her face.
yeah.
And watching her trudge through that stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, so who else do you want to shout out, man? Are there any? Like I said, you had a long list of mentors, and so I use this thing. I call it like the 4 wheels on a car, right? So it's having a good peer group, which is essentially like the environment that you're in, having peers who hold you accountable, who push you, motivate you, right? So a good circle of friends, having good coaches, right? Who can kind of guide you and tell you, hey, this is what you need to do. But mentors are really the silver bullet, right? The mentors are the 3rd wheel, and then sponsors are the 5th wheel, right? But having mentors are really, really, really crucial. You know what I mean? So are there any other folks that we missed out on? Or is there something that you prepared for that I didn't ask you that you're like, if you ask me this, I'm knocking it out the park?
I didn't have anything prepared. I think I've covered think everything I probably could to stay within the bandwidth here.
Yeah.
In terms of the shout outs, I'm probably sure I've missed so many people, so I probably couldn't list them all. But I will say just briefly, in my current what I do now, I'm always very much influenced by people around me, like Darryl Thompson with the group. They're the lobbying firm that when I did my initial internship here, that's where I was placed. And they taught me the ropes on the political scene in DC. So I have a lot that I've attributed that I do now that I've learned from him and Paul and the whole team there is fantastic. I can list them all, but the whole team is fantastic, and great other people who I work very closely with and who I learn a lot from. I take examples that they have and they share with me now. So I can't list them all here, but I would definitely. They know who they are. They I mean, I see a lot of them want to go. I just came from a conference. I had to a conference today. I had one yesterday. Just came from, and the day before, and people stopped me. I was just telling someone, you walk through the conference door, and it took me an hour and a half to make 15 feet. Everyone's stopping and talking to me because I know so many people.
Right.
And everyone's just doing so many fantastic things, and it just they even if they don't think they do play an influence on how I am.
Yeah. So here's the last thing, we're gonna go out on this. Sure. What do you have? What gives you the most joy and satisfaction from the work that you do? And in terms of how it impacts, like the everyday citizen, as far as being a public servant.
I think one of the most satisfying things is when someone says, I know Bermuda. Because, in my role, Bermuda's a small island. It's 20 miles by 1 mile. Not a lot of people know it except for the Bermuda Triangle or, the odd chance people goes by cruise. So, one of the benefits of being in this role specifically is I get the chance to promote the island, our economics, our policies, our drive, what makes us. And so, it's a lot of times I'm in these rooms and people will say, I've never heard of the place, or, oh, I just heard about it, and I've never been there. And so I love the fact that when I'm able to share that story, and then those people then tell people, hey, I know about Bermuda. Or I see people who say, hey, I remember you talked about Bermuda, and I had the chance to go there. We had a digital asset forum event that took place a couple months ago. And I remember maybe a few months before that mentioning it to people and people going there. And I just ran into a few of them the other day and they said, hey, I went to that event you mentioned and Bermuda was beautiful. So it gives me a lot of joy when I'm able to promote Bermuda from that lens and we get companies that come and domicile in the country, and because the little victories add up and it makes the country better. So that's me being very happy with this
That's what's up, man. So thanks again for taking the time out.
Appreciate it,
to
Derek.
share this with us. I really appreciate it. Thank you guys for joining us on another episode of the Immigrant Education Collaborative Podcast. See you next time. Thank you for checking out this latest episode of the Immigrant Education Collaborative Podcast. We hope you enjoyed it as much as we did. Please shoot us a comment. Let us know what your favorite part is. Shoot us some suggestions, what you'd like to see going forward. And thanks again for your support. Thanks for subscribing. Thanks for sharing. Thanks for liking. Thanks for your engagement. We appreciate it.